everyone, I'm Buster Green, and it's been a while since I delivered a video game review. And the reason for that is that I made a huge mistake and I played Greedfall. And beating this fucking game took 2 months of my boring pandemic life. Like, it literally took me over 50 real-time days. So, if you are into seeing me review lame clones of the Fallout series, please subscribe to that subscriber button because I need 400 subscribers to be monetized. Anyway, Greedfall. So, Greedfall at its heart is a very bad Fallout New Vegas / Skyrim clone. A little Skyrim. I guess the trees are from Skyrim. But unfortunately, in this clone, the glam and glitz of robot-infested post-apocalyptic Las Vegas have been stripped away and replaced by the butter-churning Thanksgiving dinner that is colonial America. The only thing that this game literally has going for it is the brilliant choice of theming itself in colonial America. Now, colonial America is not my favorite era of history, but it's just really never been explored in a video game that I found the idea of that actually surprisingly exciting and refreshing. Like, the closest thing I can even think of that even came close to this era was like Assassin's Creed 3, which came out like 20 years ago. And that was just way more focused on giving you a history lesson about the American Revolution. By the way, super important but weird disclaimer I have to do with this video. This is a game that very much deals with very heavy and dark political and religious themes. And despite being set in the 1600s, this game presents you with various factions that you meet, and almost all the characters in this game are just bad, negative, racist stereotypes. Like, the Christians in the game are pure evil, they're hypocrites, they're sex hungry, they're sex deprived, they hate sex, but they're racist. You meet Muslims, but the Muslims are all lying, murderers, backstabbers. And the natives, while depicted as mostly sympathetic victims, are also completely down to commit genocide on their white oppressor devils. And later on in the game, it's revealed that the natives were the only people on Earth who were worshipping the correct and real consequential gods. Like, that's a big thing to get into. Anyway, so as a result, this game leads you down a path that completely makes you want to kill Christians and Muslims and natives for various stupid reasons that the game sets up and like springs on you. And I'm just putting this disclaimer ahead of this video just so you know that in a few minutes when I'm talking about gunning down Christians and Muslims and natives, it's not because I have any personal grudges or beliefs towards any of these people or religions in real life. I mostly only killed them in the game out of self-defense and because the game's story was really forcing me to. I don't really give a fuck about what race or religion you have in real life, but as long as you're not trying to kill me, I will not try to kill you. Capiche? Anyway, back to the review. So, as I find it weird that this game is themed around colonial versus native racial genocidal conflicts, almost all of the native characters in this game are unfortunately portrayed by white and black actors, which felt really fake to me. Because there's a lot of racism written into the script, but then it feels like weird tangential racism since both sides have white and black people and neither sides actually have any people of native descent. And it's just like a weird theater troupe acting this out. Anyway, that's beside the point. So back to the game itself. The game itself is a blatant clone of Fallout New Vegas. Like, if you've played Fallout New Vegas, this is going to feel redundant for you because it feels like exactly the same game, but worse. It's a worse version of the exact same experience, despite being in a completely different setting and having completely different characters. In Fallout New Vegas, you had to help various factions take control over post-apocalyptic Las Vegas. In Greedfall, It's literally all of that same conquest bullshit, but instead of like the new California Republic and zombies and Roman centurions, it's just these various races and religions bidding for control over this island, which is themed after colonial America. Now, despite being a Fallout clone, the one positive I'll say is it has a lot less glitches than Fallout. But it's still got a lot of Fallout's annoying quirks. The maps repeat, the enemies are the same enemies the entire game. You know, all that bad shit Fallout is famous for, this game does possibly worse due to not having as much polish and not having as much budget. So there's just overall just a large lack of variety. Like, you go into every single town and you see the same buildings. Every single native village has like 50 of the same house, and when you go inside the house, every house is exactly the same. It's just the buildings are arranged different in the different cities. Anyway, like Fallout 3, that was such a groundbreaking video game. Like the first time I played Fallout 3, I was shocked because it was the first time I had seen so many real-world concepts brought into video games. Like, Fallout 3 was like one of the first video games that had actual consequences. And I played Fallout 3 like 3 times because it was so cool and I was in college, I had nothing better to do. Like, I once did a playthrough of Fallout 3 where I just tried to like do a pacifist run and settle my disputes as non-violently as possible. And then New Vegas doubled down on that formula, but opened up the story to way more different possible outcomes. So, if I'm being honest, one reason I did play this game was it scratched my love of Fallout back to being awake. Like, I don't know, I miss Fallout and there hasn't been a good Fallout experience lately, so this filled that lonely void in my heart. Oh, and heavy spoilers from here on out. I don't really give two shits about this game, so I'm just gonna talk about it off the top of my head because I had quite the experience with it and I want to just kind of recap the experience I had. So anyway, I just want to be really clear about what hooked me with this game. This game is set in an unexplored island called Tirfity, which for all things considered is colonial, pre-American, undiscovered style continent. And the world map even does one of those things where it looks like an old-timey map where they just like drew New Jersey and then like the rest of the continent was all ocean. Anyway, so the way this game was pitched to me is that you discover this America-like continent and you either have to help or hinder these various political and religious factions that are trying to colonize it. And I was honestly just full-on intrigued about that as a concept because I thought I could walk into this game, be transported back in time, and I could walk around with my 2020 values in the 1600s and just, you know, walk around telling everyone to fuck off and that their notions are incredibly flawed and leading to their early deaths. So, yeah, that's one thing that like got me to walk into this. But as the game went on, like I instantly realized it was a Fallout ripoff and it got pretty stupid pretty fast. Like I just went through the story making clan and faction choices. Like there was a point where like oppressive Christian inquisitors were trying to like kill all the Native Americans and I was like, hey, leave those fucking alone. And then I had to like rescue them and stop them from being enslaved and broke up slave camps. I mean, I did the same thing in Fallout 3, but at least here it was like borderline historically accurate. And then there's like a local Muslim population which is also backstabbing and killing everyone. And I don't know, in general I was just trying to get everyone to get along, but that ultimately was impossible. Oh, and then on top of that, there was this weird plague killing most of the colonists on the island, but remarkably the natives were not being affected by it. At first I thought it was that the colonists just hadn't infected the natives and gotten them sick yet, but it wasn't that simple. So here's some more weird shit that just hit me right off the bat with this game. Like, the island of Tirfity, where the game takes place, it's not a one-for-one recreation of the American colonies. It's more like a Disney World-esque approximation. Like, the island only has like 3 native cities for the 3 major tribes, and all these tribes look and act the same because resources, but they have different political opinions and feel different ways about different shit, and some are more peaceful, some are more hostile. Then there's like 1 major city for each of the major political and religious factions. The traders represent the British. The Bridge Alliance represents 17th century Muslims. Although they have a huge presence on this island, like, it's more like a Muslim city in like Africa in the 1700s than like, well, I mean, there's obviously no like full Muslim cities in America, but this game pretty much gives you an alternate history where, like, what if there was an entirely Muslim city? Like, what if Boston was like founded and entirely populated by Muslims, like before like the colonists got here? Like, that's an interesting thought, and I optimistically thought that, yeah, that could have made the country a lot different in my time. Anyway, but the dynamics of this island just aren't quite as clear as they should be. Like, there are devout Christians on the island, and the devout Christians are literally presented as insane, hostile, dangerous people who want to convert or kill anyone who does not accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. And upon having my first encounter with them, where they told me to accept Jesus or burn in hell, I told them rightly to fuck off, their God was fake, and proceeded to set them all on fire because I felt that was ironic. And then I continued merrily on my way. Now, the Muslims came off as cool at first, and I was really trying very hard to be cool with them. The Muslim faction primarily focuses on trying to find a cure for the plague that is killing everyone, and otherwise they're kind of like dedicated to progressing science. But literally every time the game gave me the option to trust the Muslims, I would choose to trust the Muslims. And unfortunately, because everyone in this game is just non-stop racist stereotypes, they would instantly renege on any of the deals I made with them and backstab me in literally every possible way. So later on in the game, the constant backstabbing resulted in heavy human casualties, and I don't know, is that realistic? Is that racist? It's a real, I don't know, this game just made me think about shit way too much, so maybe that's something it had going for it. Like, because it deals with like real religions and real races, it has that going for it that Fallout didn't, so that's like the only positive thing I'll say about it. Moving on. So anyway, then the natives were seemingly the weirdest faction in this game. In an absolutely shocking twist, the game presents you with clear-cut options between Christianity, Islam, or the religion that the natives worship, and then you find out about halfway through the game that in this video game, the native religion is the only actual real religion. And in fact, it gives you overwhelming evidence that anyone who's researched it long enough and has met with the native god realize that because they have an actual living, breathing god with actual superpowers, that is the real and right religion. I'm going to get more into that when I go into my story breakdown, but that's just a weird concept in a video game. Oh, and there are 2 other less important factions. There's the Coin Guard and the Naughts. The Naughts are just sailors who are literally just in the game to have cool pirate gear, but then they have these really ugly but historically accurate tattoos, and they get basically no plot development. Then the Coin Guard are the equivalent of the Hessian mercenaries in like real life, but they're also just there to fulfill story beats, and they come off pretty much just an army for the sake of having an army in the game, and they give the player generic knight gear, which is okay. Oh, and one other thing about the game itself. So the main character learns various different skills. There's like a skill tree exactly like Fallout and Skyrim. Magic is the most useful skill you can buff because, in my opinion, the melee attacks in this game are just not reliable and too often result in death. And almost all of the enemies in this game only use melee attacks. Now, the magic seems hard to use when you first start the game, but if you level it up enough, or you just stall for time, it gets decent. You can also learn how to use a gun, but learning how to use a gun in the game is really complicated because you need to have like 5 different skills like maxed out to actually wield a gun. And unfortunately, your character only gained like 1 skill point every like 5 levels to learn an ability. So yeah, it takes a while to be smart enough to use a gun. So I actually didn't unlock the gun until like the last couple of days I was playing this game. But it was worth it, and it made the game so much easier because then I could just shoot motherfuckers in the face and not waste my time. But back to the magic. The weird thing with the magic is that even though the main character and a few minor characters wield it, it's just not acknowledged in the story at all, which makes me think they just threw it in there because they were trying to rip off Skyrim. Oh, and one more thing. So all of the enemies in this game are super bland, generic animals, pretty much. Like, the only enemies in the game are bears, wolves, bats, and robbers. You know, the basics of what would actually threaten a person living in the 1600s. But then most of the in-game bosses are generic-esque Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos monsters, including this really, really gross one that looks like a fat naked woman and she attacks you by farting on you. Thankfully, that was one of the easiest bosses in the game, but still gross. Oh, and in a very interesting twist out of nowhere, the Lovecraft monsters are tied into the game's mythology as just being demigods and guardians of the native religion, which is actually a really genius way of making that work. That, again, further plays into the narrative that the native religion is the only right religion with actual stakes and consequences, which again is just so weird. Like, the game doesn't actually like get into the implications of that, but there are major philosophical implications of them just being like, the Catholics are wrong, the Muslims are wrong, everyone else is wrong, the native god is real, it has real monsters, and if you don't follow the native religion, you will get sick and die. Oh, so I also might as well bring this up now while I'm talking about the combat system. All of the fights in this game are super piss easy. They all come down to just kill the big monster with your magic, or shoot the big monster in its face with your gun. But there is one exception. There is one single hard boss in the game that has an undodgeable jump attack that one hit kills you, and they don't explain this at all. But the only way to beat the stupid boss is to realize that the undodgeable jump attack, since you can't dodge it, you have to counter it using either freeze magic or shield magic. Then it becomes very, very tedious, but not impossible to kill it. And similarly, the final boss in the game also has a similar attack pattern, but in a terrific turn of events on my first attempt to fight it, the final boss walked into a fucking wall for me, glitched out, and then I was just able to fry it to death and end the fight in seconds. So anyway, even though this game is a fucking Skyrim Fallout clone, for almost the entire game, except the very beginning and the very end, you have this RPG style fighting squad, each of whom is good at doing precisely one thing in combat. Now for me, almost the entire game, except when I was forced to change them out for subquests, I used the native princess Siora, who provides critical free healing, and the Muslim sniper Afra, who has a gun that does half decent damage without dying. Alright, so next up we need to address the next biggest elephant in the room, which is unfortunately the game's main character. So you play as the Marquis de Desardet, an emissary of the Merchant Federation. Now, in Skyrim and Fallout, you were spoiled by getting to create your own character and make up your own story with it and do whatever the fuck you wanted, which was fun. That was the funnest part of this game. Like, I played fucking Fallout as Rick and Morty. I played fucking Skyrim as like Hank Hill. But Greedfall completely drops the ball by giving you none of that. Desardet is just a fucking Pokemon trainer who you get to pick their gender, their skin color, their clothes, but then everyone knows who they are. They have a bland but well-established idea of who you are, so you just control their actions and their choices, and you go through the story. Now, I ultimately ended up going with female Desarde because female Desarde was weird. Male Desarde seemed like just a cookie-cutter prick of a protagonist, but female Desarde was seemingly one of the most unattractive, unfeminine female protagonists I have ever seen in any video game ever. And on top of that, both Desardes have this weird, unrealistic birthmark that looks like sideburns, and on the man, it just looks like a man with sideburns, but on the woman, it looks like a woman with sideburns. And when I first saw her, I was dead convinced she was just a woman with sideburns, and then I was horrified that I had no way to remove the sideburns. Oh, and then to top it off, there is a side quest early on in the game where she gets a permanent tattoo of a goatee on her face. And at a certain point, I just feel like I only picked this female character so my character wouldn't be a generic asshole, whatever. But the woman version had like a bare minimum of empathy for others. But, now that I think about it, there weren't even like female clothing options for her. Like, all the clothes were just armor and pirate clothes all the way through. I guess the point I'm trying to make right now is that Desarde was a really poorly developed character, and the female version was even worsely developed than the male version, like having literally no agency over her gender, which is like a very common video game pratfall. But I still went with the female version because the female actor just seemed to actually care about her performance, whereas the male actor seemed like he was totally phoning it in. Anyway, so that brings me to the story, and holy fuck, I'm 22 minutes in. Okay, so here's the story of Greedfall. Desarde, the legate of the Merchant Federation, starts out in a fairly well-detailed Spanish-style city called Serene. She hooks up with her bodyguard and her cousin and makes friends with a pirate captain, and then she slays a random Lovecraftian elder god that somehow popped out of a boat. Then she gets on the boat and rides her boat over to the island of Tirfadi, an America-style proxy New World colony where her dopey cousin is instantly installed as the governor of a major city, which is your home base. After that, she is assigned a primary quest to try and figure out why the natives aren't contracting the plague and to do whatever she can to try and cure the plague. So she goes around the island visiting the various cities of the world, meeting the various characters, the various tribes, getting to know the various dramas, the political aspects of what's going on, and then getting in the middle of all of it. So yeah, a lot of stupid drama happens. You go on stupid side quests, you solve crimes, you settle disputes, and along the way you put together your basic RPG team, your healer, your knight, your sniper, yada yada yada. Anyway, so this went on for a while, but then I got roadblocked for a long time by that one boss with the undodgeable jump attack, who killed me so mercilessly fast the first time I fought him that I just figured, okay, I made a mistake fighting him, I will come back when my level and defense stat is higher. But really it was just that you need to know how to use literally defensive and counteroffensive spells, which are only used against this one boss and maybe the final boss if you want to do it that way. So anyway, then the plot twists start coming in. First of all, the Coin Guard, the mercenary faction, stages a complete coup d'etat over the entire island and tries to take over everything. Now, during which there is a you can only save one moment where you have to choose whether to spare the Muslims or the Christians from being annihilated by the Coin Guard. So, once again, I need to point out that in this game, Christianity and its followers are presented as pretty much the world's most evil, hypocritical, genocidal monsters. And the game strongly implored me to save the Muslims out of their respect for science. So I did what the game wanted, and I saved the Muslims, and I let the Christians be violently murdered by a renegade army. since they were themselves trying to violently murder all the natives and the Muslims. And unlike the Muslims, who were at least doing science work, the Christians were doing literally nothing good in this game to justify their existence. Again, the way the Christians are presented in this game makes them the most dangerous faction to leave unchecked because they are crazy hillbilly murderers. So then after this, your cousin is suddenly poisoned and dying, and it is later revealed in a plot twist that the Muslims poisoned him in the next attempt at a power grab to take over the island. So then after that, I focused on stepping up my efforts to find a cure for the plague and make my cousin better. So I visited every doctor on the island and found a powerful native shaman to help us cure his illness. And at this point, the game completely veered off the rails from alternative history fanfiction into full-on anime crazy town. So literally, after this, your cousin is kidnapped and the shaman is murdered. And apparently he's been kidnapped by this mysterious native king of the Fist, who is literally Rao from Fist of the North Star. He's a completely unrealistic 10-foot tall muscle man with muscles coming out of his muscles. He lives on a mountain. He doesn't eat food. He talks to no one. No one has ever mentioned him before, and he only shows up for this one fight. And also at the end of the fight, he turns into a bird monster and you have to kill him again as a bird monster. But then after that, you finally kill him. And the story immediately picks up from there with you choosing one of 3 random tribal leaders to replace him. One is a good man who says he'll do everything perfect. Another is a neutral man who seems like an okay choice, but not as good as the first guy. And lastly, there is a crazy woman who says that if she is elected king, she will kill all the foreigners on the island. They gave me this option first, and this was the obvious wrong answer. I assumed the game would have ended early had I gone with her. Anyway, so then the Fist King, who was presented as a pure out-of-nowhere anime supervillain, later turns out to be completely justified because apparently the shaman fused your cousin with the island's life force, and now he is suddenly insane because he is sucking the power out of the earth, he is sucking the power out of the natives' god, and in doing so, he is going to become the new god of reality. Oh, and by the way, you meet the god of the natives, who is apparently the only actual real god, and he's very pissed off about this current state of affairs. So anyway, the god of the natives also reveals that the plague that is killing everyone was made by him to punish the colonizers for being assholes, causing pollution, taking people's land, yada yada yada, social justice. So I guess there was an explanation for why the natives weren't getting sick after all. Anyway, so then you dick around for, I want to say, a good month in the game after that, putting up with your cousin who is clearly like turning into a tree or some weird shit until he finally grows into a massive, unignorable, dangerous threat to society. Also, there were some monsters in this game that were seemingly acting in self-defense, but now they've turned black, and they're pretty much attacking everyone on the island in sight. So you call your cousin out on his bullshit, and he runs away to a super cliche villain lair in a volcano where you have to go alone and face him. So you go alone and face him, and he attacks you with a dragon. And you easily kill the dragon because all the bosses in this game are not programmed properly. When the fucking dragon glitches out when it walks on a weird piece of grass. And then the ending. So, since I picked female Desardet, there was a heavy implication that Desardet and her cousin were the best of friends who would absolutely never hurt each other. And maybe they full-on loved each other. Possibly even romantically, because it's the 1600s and, you know, cousin love. Anyway, so I never figured out how to get any love interest in the game. So at the end of the game, after I killed the dragon, they present you with the choice between killing your cousin or not killing your cousin. Just like that. So again, The entire game, my cousin seemed like a generous, good, nice person who had literally never done anything wrong. He had been poisoned by his enemies, and he had only started doing weird mystic shit after being corrupted and given native god powers. So I decided not to kill him. I tried to reason with him, and apparently he flipped the tables on me and got me to go along with him, genociding all the cities in the world and getting all the natives to acknowledge him as their new god, presumably after killing their old god. Okay, that was a bad ending. An interesting outcome, but a bad ending. Yeah, that ending sucked. So, unfortunately, I rebooted the game and went back to kill my cousin, since that's apparently what the game wanted. And when I rebooted and went back for the second time, I did notice the island god literally begging me to kill him, which somehow I blew off on my first go through. So, unfortunately, I wish I could tell you that the good ending was better, but it really wasn't. The good ending just gave me some basic closure on the companion storylines, but then it delivered this super fast-paced, super monotone wall of exposition that literally went so fast that I could not stop and read it, and I just blinked and suddenly it was credits. So, Greedfall was a messed up game. I'm going to very generously give it a 6 out of 10, and that score is only because it did manage to hold my attention for 2 months and give me a lot of interesting thoughts about religion and politics, but it's still a low score because, fuck it, I was bored most of the time playing this game. Like, it's a long game, it's a big game, it gives you these heavy concepts, but it just presents them in a really bland way. And then because it's a clone of Fallout, it repeats all of Fallout's negatives along with its positives. And the story is just awful and slow, and very little actually happens. Like, I kept thinking, like, any second now it was going to be over, but then, like, I didn't beat this game till, like, a month later. And the characters were all insufferable racist stereotypes. And then the main character just fell into this weird uncanny valley between too defined to be fun, but too undefined to be likable. And yeah, Greedfall. What a weird game. Like, this is the first time I've ever seen a blatant clone of Fallout, and I really hope this isn't like a new trend. Like, I guess it was only a matter of time before someone tried to rip off Fallout, but this is just such a bad clone that I can literally only recommend this for people who either really, really love the shit out of Fallout New Vegas and want a similar experience, or people who just love Fallout and want something that's a little bit more realistic, I guess, but without the jokes, but I guess still the random monsters. But honestly, if you're looking for a Fallout spin-off to play, like, literally just play any Fallout game. Like, all of them are better than this game. Like, I guess except Fallout 76. Like, I can really only recommend this game if you're, like, really into alternate history, or you're just a sociopath who wants to go around murdering monsters, Christians, Muslims, and natives. Because, yeah, you could do that too. I didn't, but it's an option. Alright, that was Greedfall. Oh man, that was a lot to talk about. Alright, I was Mute Buster Green, and hopefully I review another video game before the next 2 months are over. Alright guys, thanks for sitting through this. Later.